Hey, my name's Izzy. This is Rolling Virtual Cards coming at you with another good podcast. This time we're talking about the 33 Magic. This is the deck design philosophy that I follow when it comes to Magic the Gathering, where you split decks up into 3/3. One third is going to be lands, the next third is going to be that meat and potatoes, the part that I really enjoy talking about. That's what my future videos are going about on this channel. I'll still be giving you a deck overview at the end. Don't worry. And then the last third is the probably most important, and that's your interaction, card draw, and mana advantage. This is all about just trying to get your deck to function in the format that is Commander. This philosophy does pertain to other formats, but it does boil down a little differently there with 4 copies of each card and how you run stuff. So today we're just going to focus mainly on decks in. With that said, let's hop right. First up, let's talk about those 3 sections. The lands, the meat and potatoes on the right there, and then the center part here again is you need to run it to make the deck function, okay? Lands are simple. You need around 33 lands. A third of your deck should be lands. Yes, you can up it if you realize after building the deck, I'm not drawing into enough lands, I need to be able to get more. And you can lower it if you notice I'm drawing into too many lands, this isn't functioning. Now, this does take a lot of practice and a lot of testing. And the less lands you have, the more mulligans you're going to have to take. I like 33 lands. I'm okay mulling down to 5. I've run plenty of games mulling down to 5 just to make sure I have 2 lands in my hand. It makes it so that mid-game, late game, I'm not drawing into that extra land that I did not need. That middle section there, that card draw, card advantage stuff, the ramp packages, the interaction is very important. We'll get into that in the next slide. Just know you need about a third of your deck to function. How do you go which way where? Well, you can break it down into 11 card advantage cards, 11 ramp cards, and 11 interaction cards. Give or take what you're trying to do. If your commander's cheaper, maybe you don't need as many ramp spells. If your commander is drawing you cards, you might not need as many draw spells. If your commander interacts with your opponents in a impactful way, you might not need to run as many interaction spells. That given and taking, I would suggest starting with 11 of each, and again, buffering from there after testing. And lastly, the big part, the thing that this video is mainly about, what my future videos will be about, that meat and potatoes, the Tamir Ascendancy, right? Just to tell you, Tamir Ascendancy is a green, a blue, and a red for an enchantment. Creatures you control have haste. And whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater enters, you may draw a card. Tamir Ascendancy isn't a card you run in every deck, but in the decks that it does run in, it's an additional one of those card draw cards. It's an additional way for you to be able to get damage in, or to ramp faster if you're running creatures that can tap for mana. Normally you have to wait a turn. With Tamir Ascendancy, you don't, because it gives them haste. So there's a lot of stuff Tamir Ascendancy is doing, but it's not for every deck. It's a really good card. Some might even say like a golden potato in some decks, where like, my cat really wants me. I'll just hold. Here's my cat. Some might even say like the golden potato of a deck, just because of what it does for you, what it gives you. Oh, now she's attacking. She want to attack me. She wants me to hold her, and then she wants to hit me. Not nice. So yeah, that's the meat and potatoes. Those unique cards, those fun cards that you get to talk about. And that's what I'm trying to talk about in my future videos, where, yes, we could talk about the other 66 cards, but this 33 cards, those cards that are just the reason you want to play the deck. The golden potato, the reason you built the deck in the first place. You saw the commander, you thought, this card would work with it. I love that idea. Let's go for it. That's the idea. That's why we're doing it. But breaking down that other 33 before we get into the meat and potatoes, it's Esper Sentinel, Soul Ring, and Path to Exile are great examples. They're all one drops, they're all early plays, they can be late plays. They all do their job properly for the option in that 33. Esper Sentinel is drawing you cards constantly, and that's what you want in a card draw. You really want that option to be able to draw more than what the card offered, see more than what the card is doing. The more options you have, the better. Card advantage in Magic the Gathering is different than other cards in some other games because it does have a mana system, right? You need the right mana to play it. So drawing a card isn't always card advantage because sometimes you're drawing to a card you can't play or a card that you don't want to play that's not useful right now, right? You drew into Path to Exile, but there's nothing to remove, okay? Even though Path to Exile says it's a one-drop, it's not good in Commander turn 1 because there's nothing to remove. And in fact, early game, you're ramping someone with it, and that's not very useful, right? Soul Ring's always good. Ramp early game is your best option because it does get you to the next step. The problem with ramp early game with no card advantage is that you might run out of steam. You have all this mana, you have your commander, but if your commander's not drawing you cards, there's nothing you can do. Which is why if your commander doesn't draw you cards, card draw is probably more important than ramp because the card draw can get you into the ramp. It can at least make sure. Is she constantly coming up here today? I don't understand. She doesn't normally do that. Let me check on her 1 second, guys. She's doing better. I don't know what she's dealing with. Gotta take care of my cat. But yeah, so all three really add into that nice spot where you need to know what you want, how you need it, and it really breaks down into an interesting package and what cards are best. And I'll break down into this more the next podcast, really just breaking down that 33 so people know what to look for when building a deck. With all that being said, the next section is lands. And sure, I'll do a podcast on lands at some point because it is a third of the deck. I find lands kind of boring sometimes. You either just want them to produce good colors so that way you can play your spells, or you want them to have some good effect, like Reliquary Tower over there. No maximum hand size on a land isn't bad. Where's the balance? I like 11 is fine if you're playing monocolored. From there at 2, I drop it down to like 5 or 6. At 3 colors, you're looking at like 3 or 4. At 4 colors, you can probably get away with 1 or 2. And 5 colors, maybe 1. If it's like a really good utility. But the more colors you add, the less chances you should have of running utility lands because you need the right colors to be able to play the right cards. But let's get into the meat and potatoes, the main thing. I sourced from EDH Rec the top 10 most popular themes. And we're going to talk about commanders and their 33s and what you would want to do with them, okay? The first up is tokens, represented by Parallel Lives, doubling the tokens you create, right? Tokens is the most popular commander type, archetype or theme, right? When building a 33 with tokens, you have 2 things you want to look at. You want to look at your commander, and you want to look at exactly what they want, right? Because there are 2 types of things when it comes to tokens. Creating tokens and doing stuff with those tokens, right? If your commander creates tokens, like Caesar, maybe you just want to be able to run a bunch of cards that buff creatures. A lot of anthem effects. A lot of all creatures have death touch. All creatures get first strike, giving all creatures +3/+3, stuff to make them big, because you don't need to make the tokens. Caesar's making the tokens, right? Not only is he making them, they come in tapped and attacking. So that kind of like feel of I don't need to make tokens. I have a token generator in my command zone. If I run too many token generators outside, I'm going to flood with tokens and have nothing to do with them. I need something to do them. I want to buff them. Whereas Balin here on the left doesn't make tokens. He needs the tokens. What are you doing with them? Hey, Balin's effects. Tapping 2 to make a color or to add a mana. Tapping 3 to draw a card. Tapping 4 to put 3 counters on it and give it trample, right? That's where it's at. That's what it's doing. My cat is back again. You can't see it because it's hidden, but it wants to sit with me. And the issue is my desk is too small. Maybe I should make it big. Let me make it bigger. 1 sec. Okay, back after a deep second time. So, in the end, when building 4 tokens, you need to know if your commander wants you to make a lot of tokens with that 33, or if your commander makes the tokens and just needs something to do with them. Okay. Next up, second most popular is artifacts. Artifacts makes a little bit more difficult to tell. Honestly, it almost breaks down to you just need 33 artifacts, which makes sense and kind of just is a reason why it's popular. But let's look at the 2 card choices I have. Your first option is something like Urza, Chief Artificer, right? This one has affinity for artifact creatures, gives artifact creatures control menace, and then creates artifact creatures each end step that are buffed by the amount of artifacts. Whereas Breya makes you 2 artifacts on ETB and then does stuff with those artifacts by sacrificing. When looking at these 2, one of them, Urza, just wants you to flood the field with artifact creatures. More and more artifact creatures. Making him cheaper, cheating on his mana cost and his mana tax if he ever gets removed, buffing the constructs you're making. All this other stuff is being done with Urza as long as you just flood it with artifact creatures. That's the 33s is 33 artifact creatures, the best ones you can find that just kind of synergistically work together. Maybe they buff each other in some way. That's going to be what Urza wants. Whereas Breya is sitting here going, well, I can make you artifacts that you can sacrifice. Or maybe run some artifacts that recur themselves. That way I can keep sacrificing them so that I can keep getting more card advantage. So you're not looking for just any old artifact creature like Urza does. Urza's like, I'm just going to make you all really good. And then even the ones that aren't great, you're at least helping, right? Breya's like, you're helping all right. You're gone. You're not here. I'm not using you. Or I used you to get what I needed, which was damage on my opponents or their planeswalkers, removal of a creature, or gaining some life, right? But on top of that, because Breya has an ETB and is in blue, you can get to a subsect of the 33, which is, oh, let's just run clones. Even if the clone dies because it's not a legend, you still get the ETB effect, which is good. That's still 2 artifacts, which allows you to use Breya's effect, right? That's useful. And then on top of that, if you get to keep a Breya because it's a clone that isn't legendary, like a lot of those cards are nowadays, you get a 4/4 that you can keep swinging with. So, but also just any way to flicker it could also work, you know? Just there's a lot of ways to make Breya function with the 33, giving you some flexibility on which ways you want to go. What you don't need to do is flood the deck with artifacts necessarily, especially not ones that don't do anything. Playing an artifact that's like, oh, this is such a cool artifact because it's utilitarian based, but it needs to stay on the field. That's not helpful for Breya. Breya wants it in the graveyard. Breya wants to use its effect. Breya wants to be flickered multiple times to make a lot of Thopters and to then sacrifice those Thopters. Breya wants artifact tokens, to be fair. And so maybe you fill your deck with ways to make a lot of artifact tokens, like treasures and clues and junk, all those guys, and food even. And just, cool, now I have things I can sacrifice. That could be a way to do Breya. And so there's so many different ways to do Breya. which is interesting. Whereas with Urza, it's just put 33 good artifact creature tokens or artifact creatures and maybe make them cheap. You want them to be cheap so that way Urza can get out, right? You want like cheap 0/1 drop ones. They'll all work together in the. Next up is +1/+1 counters. Not just any counters, +1/+1 counters. Hardened Scales the representation, it gives you an additional one. So if you were to put like 5, you'd put 6 instead. Okay. The example here is Shalaya and Azuri. Shalaya wants 1/1 counters. You need to play cards that put 1/1 counters on stuff, because whenever one or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature, Shalaya deals that much damage to target opponent. There is an infinite with that. We're not talking about that necessarily here. But we're talking about, technically, if you want to talk about that infinite for a second, that would be part of the 33. That's the meat and potatoes. That's the, we're going to set aside some section to this engine in order to just have a win con. So what Shalaya is doing is saying, hey, oh, that's when one or more 1/1 counters put on a creature, it deals that much damage. You can run a X deck where you're all those Hydras and other cards that enter with X counters on them. Technically, they enter, you put the counters on, Shalaya sees that, and then boom. But if one or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature you control, so technically speaking, if you put one 1/1 counter on 5 creatures, that's 5 different triggers of 1 damage that Shalaya and Halar can do. Very interesting way to look at it, because a lot of 1/1 counter commanders are like Azuri, right? Azuri, Claw of Progress, puts the counters on them. You get experience counters whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, and then at the combat, you put X 1/1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is the number of experience counters you have. So in Azuri's case, you don't care if you have any other cards that put 1/1 counters on stuff. You don't need them. None of them. What you do need is creatures to put those on. Creatures that enjoy 1/1 counters. Creatures that do stuff with 1/1 counters. Creatures that, oh, I tap for power, so let's make my creature really big. The cool thing is that they both share cards. Hardened Scales and cards like Hardened Scales are in both these decks because they additional counters, okay? More so in Shalaya, less so in Azuri, because Azuri, eventually you're like adding like 10 counters onto something, so what's 11? But stuff like doubling the amount of counters you're putting on, that's something you put in both. Because Azuri's like, I'm putting 10, nah, I'm putting 20. That's when it gets crazy. And that's the difference when it comes to 33 with something like a 1/1 counter deck. You need to analyze the commander, understand what they need. They're both 1/1 counter decks, but they're not the same meat and potatoes. They're slightly different. One is lamb, the other one is roast beef. Okay? One is using Yukon gold potatoes, the other one's using red potatoes. I should do some more research on different potatoes. Next up is treasures. I don't know why EDH Rec has Ramirez de Portaro Pillager as this is a treasure card. It can't even go in either of these decks, but he does make treasures. It's a pirate. I guess that makes sense, right? There's so many other cards I would use to represent treasures, and I could have, but I thought it was funny that that's what they chose. Mr. House and Magda. The separation here is simple. Again, Mr. House wants you to make a bunch of treasures. Magda is making treasures. They both have something to do with it, right? Mr. House is saying, hey, if you use my treasures to roll this, you get to roll additional 6-sided dice, up to 5 dice total, because you roll a 6-sided dice plus 1 additional for each mana from a treasure spent to cast it, right? So being able to play all those additional, roll those additional dice, knowing that if you get 4 or higher, you're going to make robots, and knowing that if you end up getting a 6, you will get another treasure, is great. But it's a treasure deck because you need to make a lot of treasures. Magda's saying, nah, you don't run ways to produce treasures. I mean, you can. It's helpful, a little useful. Treasures as a theme is a little bit begotten in the sense that treasures themselves are ramp. So when you're doing this, you're kind of like, well, you don't have to make it, but making them isn't bad. Plus, Magda can use those treasures because sacrificing 5 gets you either a big dragon or a really scary artifact. Or a big artifact or a really scary dragon. It's your choice. Big scary dragon, scary big artifact. Magda is doing this really interesting thing, though, where it just wants dwarves. Just put dwarves in the deck, guys. If you want to have fun, put the 7 lucky dwarves in the deck and run all 7. I think that's the 7. Was it 9? No, I think it was 7. And just be able to do like this cool. Was it the 9 dwarves? I don't know. It's the one that you can run like I think 9 of or 7 of, something like that. I think it's funny. Magda's such a fun commander. It's both a CDH commander and definitely not a CDH commander if you want it to be. But it does a lot of fun things. It's interesting. But you don't need to produce the treasures. You don't need to run a bunch of cards that make treasures in the deck because she's producing the treasures herself. Okay? Just run all these dwarfs that help produce the treasures instead, giving you a double up. Instead of just a card that, oh, this just makes treasures, you're getting a card that makes treasures and a body. So that's the difference. That's what you're looking at when you're looking for the 33 in a treasure deck. Do you need to make them, or is your commander make? So next up, we're going to talk about the amazing world of life gain. I love life gain. I think it's super interesting. But there is a few things to look at when it comes to it. Now, these aren't going to show all of them, but I'll go into it anyway. The Sanguine Bond is a great card. Being able to gain, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life is cool. And actually, I guess that will help represent some stuff, because there's some commanders that do it that way. So, these are the 3 dichotomies. Aloro gives you the life gain. You don't have to try to gain life with Aloro. He's giving you it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 2 life, even if he's in your command zone. And then when you gain life, you can pay 1 to draw a card, and each opponent loses. Okay? You do not technically need to run any life gain in Aloro, because he gains you life. The problem is you probably want to draw more cards. So you do add some life gain. How much? Just enough to be able to trigger his effect more often so that you can draw more cards. Okay? Just enough to really push yourself to that next level of card advantage. But mainly, you also need to realize Aloro is expensive. And this is getting into something that we haven't seen before. How much of the 33 is dedicated to protecting your, right? And that's important, okay? If your commander needs to be on the field and is seen as a threat while on the field, you might need to run some protection. And that protection, unfortunately, does fall into the 33. The reason it falls into the 33 is because at most you could probably argue it's interaction, because it's preventing my opponents from interacting with me. And that's not bad. That's not a bad argument. It's not a bad faith argument. But it is, I guess, find a middle ground there. If you can remove a removal spell to add a protection spell, cool. If you can remove a life gain spell to add a protection spell, Aloro's gaining you out of life no matter what, which is cool. And that's what I wanted to talk about. The fact that you're always gaining life on Aloro each turn, you could look at, oh, more life gain triggers Aloro more often, but he does gain you 2 life each upkeep. So instead, run a bunch of cards that whenever you gain life, something happens, like Sanguine Bond. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So every upkeep, every one of your upkeeps, even if Aloro's not on the field, you're hurting people. You're doing stuff. Then you get a bonus if he's on the field, okay? Aloro's really good in that regard, where he can just sit on his chair, rest on his morals, and you just run anything that triggers when you gain life, okay? Dina, Soul Steeper, is the opposite. You need to run ways to gain deck in order to trigger her. Ignore the other part. It's cool. I get it. It gets plus X plus 0 to end a turn where X is sacrifice creature's power, but that's not what we're worrying about here. When you gain life, each opponent loses. Okay? This is similar to Sanguine Bond, but here's the difference. If Diana had said, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life, then you would want to go for the big life. Gain X life, gain triple X life. Whenever you do this, gain 5 life. Return all the cards from your graveyard to your deck and gain life equal to the amount of cards returned to your library. Stuff like that, right? Gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand each turn. Cool. Diana doesn't want that. Dina wants the ability to gain life multiple times. She wants Soul Sister-esque effects. Whenever you do this, gain 1 life, gain 1 life, gain 1 life, gain 1 life, gain 2 life. All these small little life gain triggers, because doing all that will eventually trigger Dina. Just keep draining and draining and draining and draining. Oh, I got 10 triggers each turn. Everyone's losing 10 life. Boom, 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 boom. Sanguine Bond's effect, and a commander similar to her, to its effect, would be more of that gain 20 life, target opponent loses 20. That's what you'd be going with something like with Sanguine Bond. That's the idea. So yeah, when looking at life gain, you want to know, do you want to gain a lot of life gain at once or a lot of triggers of I gain life, right? And does your commander give you that life gain? If so, can you just run a bunch of those triggers that gain you life? The next most popular is equipment. And equipment is another weird one, okay? Most equipment commanders fall under 2 categories, I guess. It's weird. Most good equipment commanders fall under, like, I guess 1. No, I'd say 2. And that's why I have Gallia and Sir Gwyn, okay? The separation is I help you get to your equipment, and your equipment help you get to more equipment, right? A lot of equipment commanders just draw you cards, which is good. Drawing cards on your commander is probably the best thing your commander can do, okay? Sir Gwyn drawing you a card whenever an equipped creature attacks is great. That's 1 draw per equipped creature. Yes, you're losing life. Counterbalance it with some more life gain, or win the game faster. Your choice. The reason why you're not seeing buffs with it, like, again, Gallia here is, oh, look at me. What am I doing? They both help you cheat the cost of the equipment, right? But Gallia gives you that 1 extra card each turn. Oh, you can look at the top card of your library to be able to cast it, okay? What's the difference here? Well, Sir Gwyn likes a set board helps Sir Gwyn more. Gallia helps you set the board up, okay? Sir Gwyn's like, okay, well, I cost more, and then once I'm out, you better have like a field of creatures that are equipped. I don't care what the equipments are, by the way. I just want to draw more cards. So even like cheap 1-drop equipments that equip for 0, or 0-drop equipments that equip for 1 or 2, that's great. Just putting them on all these things and then going, cool, now I got all these knights, I've got all these equipments. Technically, actually, you don't even need that board. You just need a board full of knights and equipments. And then you cast Sir Gwyn and just go, equip. Everything has it, and then you swing. And even if Sir Gwyn's not swinging that turn, since you attacked, you will get a draw for each creature that attacked. And you want more protective equipment, more things that'll, like, oh, you can't block this guy, because you don't want to lose your guy. They're drawing you cards. And if you can make them unblockable or give them protection so that they can't be blocked, or give them a big booty so they can be blocked but they won't die, you'll draw a lot of cards, and then that'll get you into more knights and more equipment. And those knights and equipments will get you to that next level of being able to stomp your opponent out. Whereas Gallia is sitting here going, yeah, you get me out first, and now you can help find all the equipment, and, you want to just make sure that you can see the top card of your library, and you want to run a lot of equipment and auras in this deck. Now, we're talking equipment, so if you want to focus on equipment, yes, you need 33 equipment in this deck, whereas Sir Gwyn is like a combination of equipment and knights, okay? Gallia is like, No, I just need the equipment. Now, what are you doing with the equipment? You're putting it on Gallia. It's a Voltron deck. Why? Because if you're running 33 equipment, you don't have space for other creatures. But you don't care about other creatures. Nowhere on Gallia do you draw extra cards for having other creatures. No. You just put them on Gallia, and Gallia goes like, cool, thank you. And then attacks. It knocks someone out. And it has vigilance, so it can protect you too. So it does cool things. Something, though, that this archetype, this theme shows off very well is the 33 bleeding into each other. And what do I mean by that? Well, artifacts did it too, a bit. But let's use his. Sir Gwyn wants you to run a lot of equipment, a lot of knights. Well, let's say you split it kind of down the middle. Let's say you do 22 equipment and 11 knights, or 20 equipment and 15 equipment, 15 knights would be 30. So 16 and 16, and then you have an additional equipment, okay? A really good equipment or something, right? So then all of a sudden that's your 33. And then you're noticing, well, okay, but I need more. I need more equipment or more knights. And this is where you start breaking into the, yes, I have my 33, but hey, I don't need as much interaction because some of my equipment interacts, right? My equipment's, whenever I attack, I destroy something, or whenever I deal damage, I destroy an equipment, or I destroy an artifact or a planeswalker. Whenever I do this, that happens. Or you have a knight that's doing something, or an equipment that ramps you in some way. Or there's a lot of equipments that draw you cards, equipments that make you treasures. You start running those, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't need these ramp spells as much. I'm gonna lower that 33 volume down. Let's cut those down to like 6 each, giving myself a little more access to better equipment. Or you're not necessarily cutting them down, right? You're going, let's look at this stuff and see if there's equipments or knights that fill that hole. Are there more than 33 cards that can help Sir Gwyn function better as a command? It's the same thing with Gallia, right? Is there more options to do this, right? The downside with equipments is you do need a creature and something equipped to it. And a lot of the ramp spells are treasure making. You have to hit someone. So if they're not open, there's a lot of steps to be able to get the ramp going, right? And Sir Gwyn runs into that issue because it's a 6-drop, right? Whereas Gallia is a 4-drop. You can get it out and just go, cool. Oh, yep, there's my little thing that makes treasures. Let's hit the guy that's open, make a treasure, right? But the treasures won't help you get your commander out, right? And that's problematic. So you need to balance it. You need to go, okay, that's okay to do with removal, and I don't need a lot of card draw. Sir Gwyn's doing the card draw, so I can cut that card draw immensely. Probably like a very much down. I need some early game card draw, like 5 or 6 cards. The rest can probably just be removed because Sir Gwyn does the drawing. And that's the deck design. That's the idea. You started with your 33, the nice meat, the nice potatoes, and you get to that point where Sir Gwyn is doing its job. It's really pushing that, okay, now I got it out. I needed the ramp package. I needed my 11, maybe even more, of ramp that just helps me get Sir Gwyn out. Because it's expensive. So that leads into talking about the other 33, which we'll go into more again next week. But this is a fun situation to find yourself where an army is with Sir Gwyn, whereas a standalone knight is with Gallia. The next option is aristocrats. Aristocrats is all about sacrificing something to trigger life loss, usually. Cruel Celebrant is the best example here. Whenever it or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses life and you gain a life. It's simple. You drain people. It's all about these guys die to drain these guys. Tesa's doing this whole double trigger. Oh, a creature died? Cool. Cruel Celebrant's on the field. Each opponent loses 2 life and I gain a life. This makes it half as much you got to do. You don't need an infinite combo to win with her. You're just draining a lot of people. You know, if you have like 3 Cruel Celebrant, like 3 aristocrat effects on the field instead of 3 damage or 3 life drained each turn, or each time a creature dies, it's 6. So all of a sudden you just have to sacrifice like 5 creatures, and boom, your opponent's lost 30 life. And you're just sitting there laughing at them like, yeah, you should have thought about this before you came at me. Whereas Mirren is like, yeah, I'm an aristocrat deck because I do have that recursion. being able to have an experience counter whenever a creature dies means you are sacrificing them to get the experience counters, but then you can either add it back to your hand or back to the field once you have enough experience counters. And that's the cool thing with Marion, right? Marion doesn't need other cards that sacrifice stuff. You don't need this creature sacrifices stuff. This creature is the thing that recurs itself. This is the creature that does the aristocrat effect, right? No, you run the aristocrat effect and a creature that sacrifices itself and does something like Steve, or that little mite thing that you sacrifice and pop an artifact your opponent controls. It's like 1 green or something like that. Very useful because you can just sack it and then get it back and never let other people have good artifacts. And Steve keeps ramping you each turn. And that's 1 sacrifice each turn. Now that might not be a lot, mind you, but there are ways to double up Mirren's triggers. Now you get 2 things back. Now you can sacrifice these 2 things. So you're running a lot of creatures that sacrifice themselves to do a lot of things. And then Cruel Celebrant and her friends, not Cruel Celebrant, but, you know, the mono black and the black green aristocrat friends are like, hey, yep, we're just going to keep draining my opponents nice and slowly, and you're playing this control deck. Whereas Teysa's fast and loose, and she likes tokens. And here's the thing about tokens, okay? Teysa is saying creature tokens you control have vigilance and lifelink. What she's saying as an aristocrat deck is you don't need to run sacrifice. You want token creation. Make a bunch of tokens, run the aristocrat stuff, and just swing with your tokens. If they happen to die, cool. Aristocrat effects happen, and they double up. So you're getting a double drain on these guys, right? And even if not, oh, you're coming at me, cool. I'm going to 4 block that creature, and all 4 of my creatures are going to die, and your creature's going to die, and then everyone's going to lose, each one of you are going to lose 8 life, and I'm going to gain 8 life. So, in fact, you did something awful. And then maybe as a finisher, you can run 1 or 2 cool, interesting sacrifice options that are free to just, okay, cool, I have like 3 effects on the field, everyone's low. Here's my sack outlet, sacrifice the rest of my tokens, I win. You know? And that's the difference, right? Marin's nice and slow paced, it's a control deck, you're running these cool sacrificed creatures, while also running aristocrat effects. Whereas Teysa's like, no, just generate a lot of tokens, but also give me some of those aristocrat effects. How many aristocrat effects do you need? That's up to you. The more the merrier, in my opinion, because it's kind of the big push, and there's not a lot of them, to be fair. There's like maybe 10 good ones, and that's pushing it. There's probably 5 good ones and 10 playable ones. So, but that's aristocrats. I think it's fun to look at it and see what goes with it. Next up is your boy spell slinging. Spell slinging is such a weird situation here, okay? So whenever spell slinging doesn't have to be instants and sorceries, but a lot of times it is instants and sorceries, okay? Spell slinging is when you get triggers for casting multiple spells, or whenever you cast a spell. Magecraft is the best example of this. Whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, create a treasure token, okay? Technically, like Prowess could be considered spell slinging, but actually no. Prowess is more like Storm, okay? Spell slinging is, well, look at Stella, okay? Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn, you may play that card, okay? This is saying cast 2 spells on everyone's turn. Okay, this is not just your turn. This is everyone's turn. You want to be casting 2 spells. So you need a lot of mana, a lot of way to generate mana, like Stormkill Artist, where every time you cast one of your cheap artifact, instants or sorceries, you do something with it, right? And then you have this other effect on her where you can tap her to copy an instant sorcery as long as you've cast 3 or more spells this turn. Okay, so if it's your third, you can 3rd or more. Here's the thing with Stella Lee. Okay, the idea behind her is this interesting one where you need a balance of really cheap instances and then a balance of other cards that trigger off casting instants and sorcery. And you need these cards because Stella's not doing enough on her own. Okay, casting, if you were to just fill Stella up with a bunch of one drop, what is those called? Cantrips, where you like cast it as instant speed and you draw a card. Or look at the top 2 cards, you like scry 2 and draw a card, right? It'd be okay, because like each turn you cast 2 of them, and then boom, you get to X out the top card and you get another card to play, okay? That's cool. And if you cast your 3rd one, each turn you can tap her at least 1 rotation around to get a 2nd one of those. And they're each gonna replace themselves. But what are you doing with this? How are you winning? This is just a card advantage engine, and that's it, right? Unless the copy spell is a burn spell, where you're like, yeah, 2 spells to give me card advantage and 1 spell to burn my opponents. And lightning bolt twice. Well, that's not good enough. And you're gonna run out of cards eventually. So what are you doing here? Well, what you're doing here is also running cards that burn people whenever you cast into a sorcery spell. And Stella's gonna fuel that. A lot of times when you have decks that whenever you cast into a sorcery spell, deal damage to an opponent, it's cool, it's good, but you run out of fuel. You run out of cards to cast. Stella goes, no, you're good. You're good. You have 2 or 3 of those guys that burn your opponents. And then each turn you cast 2 spells. And then you can exile a card and you can cast that card. And since it's probably another instant card, you can just do it and it keeps Stella going. Boom, boom, keep going, keep going. These cards draw me cards. These cards draw me cards. Go, go, go. That's the idea. That's the goal with Stella. Your 33 is a combination of instances. You can do sorceries, but it's instances because you need to cast them on your opponent's turn. And creatures that also trigger off casting instances or non-creature spells, right? Not necessarily creatures, but cards that do, right? Most of the time they're creatures, though. And that breaks into the blending into the 33, where you really don't need card draw in this deck because Stella's doing it. So, and the cards you're running are doing it. So you can probably cut down on your card draw engines and run more cards. Or just make your card draw engine a lot of cantrips, right? Add 11 more cantrips because of it. So, whereas Kess just gives you the ability to cast instant sorcery from your graveyard. And if a spell is cast this way, during each of your turns, you may cast an instant sorcery from your graveyard. If your spell is cast this way, it would be put in graveyard exile instead. So Kess is more about getting better cards, okay? It's a spell sling deck because you are casting instant sorceries, okay? And so what you're doing is you're like, okay, I got my stuff on the field, okay? But I want impactful cards. I want wheels that give me more cards and fill my graveyard up so I can reuse Kess's effect. I want big burn spells that can like deal massive damage to my opponents while also triggering all my other guys, okay? You're looking at this like interesting idea, this dichotomy of I don't need little cantrips in Kess. Kess doesn't care about cantrips. Kess wants big, impactful spells that help out. That's what Kess is looking for. And that's what Kess gets. Big, impactful spells that can really help you win the game and turn the tides. I made it work, guys. My kitty cat can lay here. I just pushed my monitor back. And now she's not touching my keyboard. I win. I get to kitty. No, she's touching my keyboard. Oh, she was not touching my keyboard. We're good. Kitty cat wins. So yeah, that's the difference in dichotomy when it comes to spell slinging. Do you want really big spells, or do you want a lot of small spells? Next up is Underworld Dreams, Nekuzar, and Ajun. This is wheels. Underworld Dream, whenever an opponent draws a card, they take a damage. Nekuzar does the same thing. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they take a damage. But on top of that, they're doing the interesting thing of, at the beginning of each player's draw a step, that player draws an additional card. So he helps start dealing more damage. And Ajun, instead, and this is the only example I can really find of this, is the wheel. Whenever you cast a spell, put cards in your hand on the bottom of your library in a random order, then draw that many cards. Ajun does not need a wheel. Although, running wheels in Ajun is funny because you get double draws. But here's these are opposite wheels. Nekuzar wants to wheel your opponents, forcing them to draw more cards and get hurt. Arjun wants you to draw a bunch of cards, triggering whenever you draw a card. There's a difference. And there's some cards that do different things on both sides, and you need to realize that. Underworld Dreams, okay, Underworld Dreams is not the best example because you can't run black. But let's take an example if there was like a red version, right? Not a good card in Argent because he's wheeling you, not your opponents, right? But Underworld Dreams is great in Nekuzar because you're gonna run more wheels. I would put wheels in first, but backups like Underworld Dreams is fine, okay? Whereas Arjun's like, okay, yeah, like, you're wheeling yourself, so you need cards that say whenever you draw a card, not whenever an opponent draws a card. So, lots of options that you can look in there, but that's what you're doing with wheels. You're really pushing that notion of, I just need to be able to either drain my opponents out or trigger a bunch of, I drew a card, this happened. I drew 7 cards, 7 triggers happen. Very helpful, very useful. On top of that, wheels are interesting because you are constantly affecting your opponents. Either by making them, regardless if the cards go in the graveyard or back into the deck, you're giving them a new hand, forcing them to go, I was planning this and now I can't. Oh, I was planning that and now I can't. And I was planning this and now I can't. Very fun, very interesting. And so, yeah, you're just looking for these ideas deck to be able to really get to that next level of my 33 is a bunch of wheels or a bunch of cards that like me drawing cards. Last but not least is landfall. Azusa lets you play additional lands, okay? But here is the big difference. I'm still setting you down because I'm still scared you're going to click something. Sorry, little kitty. The difference here is that the Necrobloom wants you to play lands, right? Whenever a land enters, you make a 0/1, green plants. Whenever you control 7 more lands with different names, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token instead. And lands you control from your grave, you have Dredge 2, which allows you to add them back to your hand, and then you can play them. You don't go out to the field, you can just play them. That's cool. 1 land a turn, that's fine. You need additional land drops. You need stuff like Azusa. Anything that allows you to play additional lands, and you can just go boom, boom, land, land, land. Play lands from my graveyard. Do this, do that, bang, bang, pow, pow, wha-bomb, right? Lots of different land drops. The trigger Necrobloom constantly, okay? Lord Windgrace, on the other hand, is sitting here going, oh, I'm the one that lets you play more lands. Because his +2 discards your hand a card, and then if you discard a land card, you draw 2 cards. You draw an additional card. But it's -3, return 2 land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the idea with Lord Windgrace is that you don't really need to run a bunch of play more lands. He is the more lands. You +2 him to, he's at 5, so you +2 him to go into the graveyard with his land, draw 2 cards, and the next turn you -3 him. Yeah, you're at a loss dichotomy here. You can't do it forever. Eventually you had to +2 twice. But that's okay. You can do it. Or flicker him and refresh him. Either way, you're fine. Lord Windgrace is doing the interesting thing where he is the land drop. Same thing like with Azusa, right? Allows you to play 2 additional lands. What are you doing in those types of decks? Your goal is just run a lot of landfall cards. You don't need landfall cards and the Necrobloom. He is the landfall card, okay? Whereas Lord Windgrace and Azusa is the ramp into the landfall. So that's the simplicity of landfall decks. Either you want to run a bunch of land ramp, or you are the land ramp, you just need to run a bunch of landfall triggers. Interesting, and really helps you think. Again, I think this is one of the simplest ways to explain the 33, right? Do not come in here going, oh, it's the Necrobloom, it's a landfall deck, and add like 11 to 20 cards, like landfall cards. Guy, what you doing, guys? You need more lands to hit the field. You don't need more triggers. No, you got your trigger. You're making 0/1s. And eventually they're going to be 2/2s. Just run ways to play lands. Run ways to play them from your graveyard. Run ways to play multiple lands per turn. So you can keep playing a fetch land from your graveyard and getting 2 land drops each time you do it. And you can do it 2 to 3 times a turn. Boom, 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 boom. Bunch of triggers, right? All off Necrobloom. Stop adding extra landfall cards. It's not necessary. You're doing a win more strategy, okay? Your win con is the Necrobloom. Lord Windgrace is not your win con, although it's -11 could be, but it's not. It's your card advantage and your ramp. And it's sitting here going, I trigger landfall because I'm putting 2 lands on the field. If you could put Necrobloom in Lord Windgrace, you would. You don't really need Azusa in Lord Windgrace because you have a -3. You want more stuff like proliferating so that Lord Windgrace can stay up so he can keep doing his -3, keep putting more lands on the field. Proliferating when lands hit the field is fantastic with Lord Windgrace because you get 2 triggers off of that for Lord Windgrace, keeping him up, allowing him to constantly -3 and get those 2 fetch lands back. So that's the idea. That's the dichotomy of 33 and 33. But that's the end of my slides. Because yes, I'm a pleb and use PowerPoint. If you liked my videos, if you loved my cat like I do, go ahead and subscribe and stay tuned for my new videos coming up. Peace.